Hey, welcome to Anime What Ifs. This is part 19 of What If Naruto Married Temari.
Naruto quietly slid from the bed so as not to wake Temari and shambled over to the window. Resting his head against the windowsill, he ran through his mental checklist of things he needed to do. Watching the rays of the rising sun move across the grounds, he smiled. It was a peaceful start to a very busy day. Turning away from the window, his gaze crossed over Temari and his grin widened. Asleep with her hair down and clinging to the pillow he'd replaced himself with, she was simply adorable. Not that he was going to tell her that his survival instincts warned him that would be painful. Walking over, he sat on the edge of the bed and softly stroked her hair with a frown. He hoped the trip to Sunagakure wouldn't really piss her off, but with his luck, there were fan-related injuries in his future.
His good mood returned as he got dressed. Temari had gone out and ordered him a new outfit and he really liked it.
She'd replaced his blue sandals with a black pair, and replaced the tiger stripe pants with a burnt orange pair with wide black stripes running lengthwise on the outside of his legs. He had a white t-shirt with the Uzumaki swirl emblazoned on it, similar to one he'd worn when he was younger. Topping it off, he kept the black jacket with the 3 orange stripes.
Glancing in the mirror, he had to smile. The outfit was really cool and Temari had picked it out for him. There had been a small argument over how much orange he was allowed, but she'd relented when he pointed out her obvious love of purple. He frowned as he thought it over. What was with blondes and purple anyway? Shrugging it off for later consideration, he headed downstairs where he almost ran into Sakura in the kitchen.
Seeing her staring out the window with a sad smile, he shuffled over to see what had drawn her interest. Seeing several of the younger kitsune playing near the edge of the garden, Naruto was confused.
The foxes were cute, especially when playing, so why would Sakura be sad?
Taking a quick glance at his former crush, he noticed she wasn't really seeing the foxes, she just happened to be staring into space in their direction. Unwilling to get punched for disturbing her, he grabbed a small loaf of bread and headed outside while gnawing on it. He'd already done a lot to try and help Sakura, but he wasn't exactly a shrink. She was going to have to take some steps on her own if she wanted to recover. Stopping after he got outside, he chewed his bread thoughtfully as he scanned the area near him. He needed to take Reynard over to the Inuzuka's for the checkup, which meant the sneaky fox was probably waiting to ambush him. Creating a handful of clones to scout, he cautiously headed towards the front gate, eyes darting here and there. Reynard was a sly old fox.
He could be anywhere.
Reaching the gate without incident, Naruto dispelled his clones and looked around in confusion.
Surely Reynard should have struck by now.
He smiled when Scarlet came bounding up to dance around his legs. Leaning down, he petted the energetic little vixen as he kept an eye on his surroundings. He was quite aware that Reynard liked using Scarlet as a distraction. When nothing happened for a few minutes, he straightened up and began considering how to hunt Reynard down. Taking lessons from Inoichi was one thing, but copying Kakashi wasn't something Naruto was willing to tolerate. Scanning his surroundings again, he heard a small poof behind him and he cursed under his breath.
"Good morning, Naruto-sama,"
Reynard called from directly behind Naruto. Muttering under his breath, Naruto slowly turned to see a highly amused Reynard standing in the small wisps of chakra smoke left from dispelling his scarlet henge.
"Yeah, good morning, smartass fox," Naruto growled to hide his embarrassment. He'd been out-ninja'd by a fox. Again. I wasn't aware you could do that. Reynard's body language switched from amused to something Naruto could only describe as smug.
Yes, according to the knowledge Kyubi-sama gave me, kitsune are supposed to be highly talented at shapeshifting. It is similar to the henju shinobi use, but it is a real transformation and not just an illusion. Naruto frowned as he walked out the gate considering Reynard's words.
"I didn't know that," he finally said. "My henge is solid."
"I thought that is how it was supposed to work."
Reynard eyed Naruto curiously. "No, I've seen shinobi use a henge," he responded. "Their jutsu is simply illusion." The fox walked silently for a few minutes.
"If you do shift,
it is probably because of Kyubi-sama's abilities," he finally said quietly. Naruto nodded in response. "It makes sense. I never really gave it any thought. It just seemed natural, but I really can't say I'm all that surprised. Gaara gets to play with sand, Han had those steam attacks, and I can actually turn into things. I so got robbed." The two walked quietly as they headed to the Inuzuka compound. Naruto was carefully watching the villagers as they passed by, somewhat concerned about how they would react to Reynard. Kitsune were not exactly very popular in Konoha, and despite everything, Naruto wasn't exactly trusted. He had support from the majority of the shinobi ranks, but the civilians only understood that he was both the clan head they needed to show respect to and the Jinchuriki of the demon who almost destroyed Konohagakure. Naruto almost preferred the harsh stares from his youth. Those had at least been honest, unlike the blows he received now. Seeing several small children run up and carefully pet Reynard, he amended his previous thoughts slightly. Some of the civilians were coming around, but the older generation, he didn't think they ever would. Still, it was measurable progress that he could be proud of. Reaching the Inuzuka compound, Naruto followed Reynard to the small animal clinic but wasn't expecting to see the person behind the front desk. "Kiba? What are you doing here?" Naruto asked with some confusion. To the best of his knowledge, Kiba was brave, loyal, brash and not exactly prone to intellectual activities, so seeing him sitting there wearing a lab coat and doing paperwork was strange. "Oh, hey Naruto." Kiba responded distractedly. "Whatcha doing here?" "I tagged along for Reynard's final checkup." "The better question is what are you doing here?" Naruto said with a bemused smile. Kiba stood up with a cocky grin and pulled a framed certificate off the wall and handed it to Naruto. "I'm the heir of the clan Naruto, of course I have to learn to care for animals." Seeing the certificate stated Kiba was registered as an apprentice vet, Naruto cocked an eyebrow. "Makes sense. You'd want to be able to help Akumaru in the field if he got hurt." Akumaru yipped at Naruto from his place at the table and wagged his tail hopefully. With a grin, Naruto moved over to scratch his ears while he chatted with Kiba. "Still, I never would have taken you as the type to study, Kiba. Your grades at the academy were almost as bad as mine." Taking the certificate back and hanging it on the wall, Kiba growled. "That's 'cause the academy was boring. Blah blah, history this, pay attention that. Who the hell needs to know that crap? This though, learning to treat injured animals actually means something." Naruto frowned at Kiba while he continued to pet Akumaru. He couldn't say that he hadn't almost that exact same thought himself, but he'd also had it pounded out of his head. As a clan head and especially if he became Hokage, the history and politics were necessary. Annoying, irritating and frustrating but still necessary. "Kiba, I'm not gonna deny that you have a point, but you do intend on becoming the next Inuzuka clan head, right?" Kiba looked a bit startled at Naruto's serious tone. "Yeah, my sister doesn't want it, so when my mom retires, it will be me." Naruto sighed. "I really hate to break this to you, but if you are to be the clan head, you will have to go back and study all that stuff and actually learn it." "What? Why?" Kiba whined. Deciding to take a different track, Naruto shifted the subject. "I've seen you at the council meetings with your mother," he said quietly. "Just between us, how much of the conversations in the council room did you fully understand?" Raising a hand to stop Kiba's response, he continued. "Not just the stuff on the surface, the underlying layers as well." Kiba's face scrunched up in confusion. "Huh? Underlying layers? It was just boring politics, right?" Naruto shook his head. "No, I used to think that way myself, but the council is full of ninja that have survived far past the usual age for a ninja. They talk in double and triple speak and there is always something underneath the underneath. A really good example would be the last meeting where there was concern about Temari-chan traveling to Suna. Can you tell me why you think there was an issue with it?" Kiba frowned in thought.
Well, they didn't want her to because she's pregnant, right? Naruto nodded, then shook his head. That was the surface layer, and a rather pathetic cover, if you ask me. Temari-chan is barely showing. We'll have to move a bit slower, but there is no health issue. The second layer was a concern from some council members that Temari-chan would stay in Suna with our children, depriving Konoha of the Namake's heirs. I didn't think of that, Kiba said quietly. It doesn't seem like something that Temari would do though. Naruto smiled at Kiba warmly. No, it's not. While it's true kunoichi are trained to act and seduce far more than shinobi are, Temari is far too blunt for such a thing. He paused and considered his statement. Not to say that she couldn't do it, but I think she's proved her commitment to Konoha. Additionally, Suna can't afford to piss Konoha off with something like this, not if they don't want IWA to smash them back into the desert. Kiba groaned and rubbed his head. Ugh, this makes my head hurt. Why can't things be simpler? Naruto chuckled. 'Cause we're shinobi. So, you want to hear about the other layers to the decision? His grin widened when Kiba backed off with an expression of horror. No, that's fine. I think I'll just chew on this little lesson for a while, thanks. Kiba stopped to consider something. I don't want to actually hear it, but how deep did that conversation go anyway? Naruto's grin dropped off his face to be replaced with a light scowl. I'm not sure myself, he admitted quietly. I know there were at least another 3 layers to the conversation, but I decided to find an alternative path to victory. I can't actually keep up with the older council members, so I played a card they weren't expecting and it worked. That seems like such a pain in the ass. Kiba whined. Are you sure about this? Naruto nodded solemnly. Yeah, you can ask your mother about it if you want. She's actually probably the easiest of the other council members to talk to cause she's pretty blunt, but she at least understands the way things work in there. Thanks man, I'm glad you pointed it out for me, but I think I might also hate you for it too. Naruto couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, he said, trying to catch his breath. I understand that exactly. I wanted to murder Erosenin when he first explained it to me. Getting up, Naruto was still snickering as he left the building and headed back out into the village, headed for the Hokage Tower. Excuse me, Naruto-sama, Reynard said as he followed Naruto. I thought we were checking up on Haru. Naruto stopped dead hearing Reynard. Fuck. After a brief detour back to the Inuzuka compound, Naruto continued on his way to the Hokage Tower, after instructing Reynard to keep an eye on Haru. Popping in through the window, he was amused to find Tsunade waiting on him along with an ANBU squad. Morning, Bachan, he called out cheerfully. Tsunade crossed her arms and glowered at Naruto. Gaki, you were supposed to be here 30 minutes ago. Why are you late? Naruto briefly considered pulling out one of Kakashi's excuses until he mentally slapped himself for the idea. Sorry, Bachan. I was help up over at the Inuzuka compound explaining the realities of being a clan head to Kiba. Tsunade eyed him suspiciously and he restrained himself from giving her his foxy grin. He'd come to the conclusion that no one actually found it innocent and in reality considered him guilty of something when he used it. Heh, I can use that to mess with people, he thought, mentally rubbing his hands in glee. Deciding Naruto was being truthful, Tsunade motioned him to sit. I've finalized a protective detail and briefed them. You sure that you want to do this? Naruto nodded and sat back in his chair. I don't like it, but it does make sense. I just wish I could talk it over with Temari-chan, but I'm aware that I can't. He forced himself to give Tsunade a small bitter smile. She isn't going to like this at all, you know. Tsunade shook her head. No, she won't, but she is a kunoichi. For that matter, she was originally trained as a Suna kunoichi. It might take her a while to cool off, but she will understand. Naruto rolled his eyes. Not gonna save me from being beaten with her fan, Bachan? Tsunade smiled with a lot of teeth showing.
Always a fun show. Moving on, I wanted you to meet the ANBU squad. Like I said, I briefed them, but the only other person in the know will be Asuma. Tsunade gestured and the squad moved into the light, causing Naruto to growl at Tsunade. Not a funny joke, Bachan. Turning back to the squad, he could only shake his head. The leader of the ANBU looked up from his book and Naruto could almost see the eye smile under the dog mask. Gravity-defying silver hair? Check. Tall, lanky build? Check. Most damning, little orange book of porn? Check. Kakashi-sensei, why the hell are you in ANBU gear? Kakashi removed his mask and gave Naruto a cheerful eye smile. Ma. No need for such language, Naruto. Any former ANBU agent can be recalled for duty by the Hokage for any reason she deems necessary. In this case, Hokage-sama decided that I was the best suited for protecting you. Motioning for his squad to join him, he introduced them to Naruto. This is Tenzo, he said, pointing at a cat mask. He has certain useful skills that you don't have clearance for. Ignoring Naruto's glower, he then waved at a purple-haired woman in another cat mask. This is Nico, she is a kenjutsu specialist and has some medical training. Naruto held up his hand to stop Kakashi for a moment. Skilled in kenjutsu, huh? Nico-chan, when we return from Suna, would you be willing to spar with me? I've trained with Inu-san here, but I'd really like an instructor that won't waste 2 to 3 hours of my time. Behind her mask, Yugo half smiled, the closest she'd come to actually smiling since Hayate's death. It might be interesting to spat with Kushina-sensei's son, especially if he had learned her kenjutsu style. Realizing Naruto was watching her, she realized she'd allowed her mind to wander. Briefly replaying the conversation in her head, she made a decision. Removing her mask, she reached out and ruffled Naruto's hair. My name is Yugo, and yes, I would like to spar with you. Your mother was the one that taught me the basics of my blade, and while I myself do not use her style, I'm excited to face it again. Naruto studied Yugo closely. For someone who stated they were excited to spar, she certainly didn't seem very happy. Seeing her eyes were slightly red and puffy, the look in them clicked. She'd lost someone in the invasion, perhaps it was not a good idea for her to travel to Suna. I'm sorry to bring this up, but, he said quietly. Are you going to be all right for this mission? He didn't fail to notice her slight twitch at his words. I'm assuming you lost someone in the invasion, he said softly. I'm sorry for your loss, but if Bachan briefed you, you know this is going to be delicate. Tsunade spoke up from her place behind her desk. Naruto has a point, Nico, she said, stressing Yugo's ANBU codename. If you are emotionally compromised, there is no shame in turning down this mission. Yugo blinked at Tsunade in confusion. ANBU did not turn down missions, they simply followed the Hokage's commands. Bowing low, she let her hair cover her eyes. Apologies, Hokage-sama. I feel that I am capable of this mission, but Naruto is correct, my lover died even before the invasion. Straightening, she turned to Naruto. You met him, you know, she said sadly. Hayate was the original proctor for the 3rd stage of the exams. Naruto's mind raced as he tried to remember. So much had happened that he hadn't really noticed the proctors. Wait, the coughing guy? Yes, he said. I remember him, he had that cough. Yugo couldn't help it, she started to laugh bitterly. Everyone always remembers his cough, but never him. He deserved more than to be cut down the way he was and only be remembered for his cough. Exchanging glances with Tsunade, Naruto stepped up to Yugo and placed a hand on her shoulder to pull her down to where he could speak in her ear. I understand that you are bitter. I understand that you most likely seek revenge. You state that you are not compromised and I will accept your word, but this mission is very important to both Konoha and me. This is your last chance to back out, so what is your choice? Yugo jerked her head up and stared at Naruto carefully. That tone and the look in his eyes, it was like he was channeling his father. Had seen in the boy, regardless of heritage, but it seemed Naruto was growing into his father's mantle more and more these days. Such interesting times, he thought as he resumed waiting. Following behind Otoke's, Naruto reached a training field located away from the edge of the village and found Gaara facing a half-circle of Sannin and several other advisory committee members. The Sannin opened ranks to let him pass and he did a quick head count. 47? These guys think they have Gaara cornered with 47? Damn, but they're arrogant. So, I understand we need to finish this, he said to Gaara as he placed his hands into the seal for his Kage Bunshin. Gaara inclined his head briefly. Uzumaki Naruto, yes, we should end this. Drawing the sand from his gourd and the surrounding ground, he formed it into a large ball hanging between him and Naruto. Not to be outdone, Naruto channeled enough chakra for it to create visible blue flames around him before he created a large army of clones. Gaara eyed them dispassionately. I admit, I am still astounded at the amount of clones you can create. Now, however, is not the time, we should begin. Motioning with both hands, the ball of sand split and darted at the Sannin watching from behind Naruto. At the same time, Naruto's clones turned and began surrounding and subduing the ones Gaara didn't have enough sand to quickly trap. What? What is the meaning of this treachery? Otoke's demanded from where he was trapped within Gaara's sand. Naruto blared at the man and walked over to sling an arm around Gaara's shoulders. I don't think you have much room to talk about treachery, honorable counselor. Gaara is both the rightful Kazekage and my brother-in-law. I'm more than a little amazed you were stupid enough to believe I was going to fight him. Shrugging Naruto's arm off uncomfortably, Gaara approached the enveloped Otoke's. I knew what you were planning, your hatred of me, but I was unsure of how to deal with it until I ran into Naruto when I was dealing with those invaders. It made sense that if I brought Naruto and Temari here to Sunagakure for my coronation, you and your allies would seize the opportunity to use him against me. You have failed, and your little rebellion dies here with you. Naruto seized Gaara's wrist urgently. Gaara, wait. Most of these are loyal Sannin following what they believed were valid orders. If you want to prove that you have changed, you can't kill them. Gaara turned his gaze to Naruto. What would you recommend, then? Naruto scratched his cheek in thought. Well, for the rank-and-file members, interrogation. If they were simply following what they believed were genuine orders, probation. If they were knowingly attacking you, prison. I see, your advice has merit. What would you propose I do with these? He asked, gesturing at the captured committee members. Naruto frowned and looked away. Well, if they're like the council members back home, they probably have some way to wiggle out of this. I suspect you probably don't need them undermining your rule. Gaara formed a sadistic grin as he turned back towards his captives and raised his hands. Listen. He commanded everyone present. Most of you will be interrogated and either placed on probation or imprisoned. There are those among you that started this treachery, and as Kazekage-elect, I am now passing summary judgment. Sabaku Soso. Still turned away, Naruto tried to tune out the sounds of Otoke's and the other members being crushed by Gaara's sand. He was never going to be as comfortable with death as Gaara, and sometimes he wished he could go back to thinking like his younger self. The one that thought being a ninja was all about cool jutsu and just being strong. It was certainly much simpler. Turning back to Gaara after the sound stopped, he watched the Suna ANBU station nearby begin to take custody of the prisoners. Sighing, he rubbed his eyes. Well, at least I didn't have to call in the evacuation command. Keying his mic, he spoke quickly. Kitsune to Inu. Clear skies, repeat clear skies. Turning the radio off without waiting for a response, he spoke to Gaara. Mission accomplished, Kazekage-sama. Dropping from the formal tones, he sighed again. Unfortunately, now comes the actual hard part of this. Gaara's mouth quirked in his almost grin. What would you consider the hard part, Naruto? Naruto frowned heavily. explaining this to Temari-chan and surviving. A quick swirl of wind and sand alerted him to Gaara making his escape. You are such a bastard sometimes. Hope you liked this episode. The next one is coming soon.